Good morning, everybody. I apologize for the delay. I've had some late breaking news I just came across this morning as I was getting ready for the stream here. So thank you for your patience. Thank you for joining me. I hope that you are having a good morning this morning. Let's see what we've got coming your way. In particular, we are starting off with an unfortunate incident in India, a plane crash of a Boeing Dreamliner with 250 to I believe it's 249 people on board. The crash happened shortly after takeoff. The plane only reached about 625 feet above the ground before it immediately began a descent and crashed into what is believed to be a doctor's office or a residential area. The overall situation, again, here's CNBC's article on it. They talked about the Boeing Dreamliner's history a little bit here. This is a long haul aircraft. This airplane was actually going from India, Ahmedabad, I think is the correct pronunciation, to London. So it was on a long haul trip. There were a lot of people on board. As you can see here, we've got various pictures of the various parts. Here's the tail of the plane sticking out of the out of a building here. Just crazy stuff to be seeing here. Over the smoke and the fire, there's a rescue team's already on site. So this is an ongoing breaking situation here. They did release the nationalities of the people on board: 169 Indians, 53 British, 7 from Portugal, and 1 Canadian. Really a tragic incident that happened I believe just last night, or just last night our time. Additional video of the situation. The passenger list that's been released is pretty tragic. There were children and infants on board, as well as people just trying to go about their everyday lives. Pretty crazy stuff to start off the news with today. Let's go ahead and move on to something else that's rather crazy. The United States is preparing to evacuate the embassy in Iraq after a series of threats from the Iranian defense minister stating that they would attack U.S. bases in the area if tensions escalated or if the nuclear negotiations with Washington break down. This indicates that they are using nuclear blackmail effectively. And for a nation that does not yet have a nuclear weapon, this is a pretty bold move on the part of Iran. The UK has responded similarly, with the UK Maritime Trade Operations issuing a warning to ships in the area in the Gulf waters. This could indicate something happening literally today or tomorrow. We don't know. We know that only that the tensions have escalated significantly in the region as Washington and Tehran try to come up with some kind of a deal here. I have opinions on this, but really the fact is that we're just negotiating with another terrorist regime in this regard. So we'll have to see how this turns out. I have noticed a pattern in negotiations, and that is that these nations are getting the U.S. involved in negotiations, getting them tied up in these negotiations enough where they can say, well, if you do this other thing, we will break off negotiations and you won't get a deal, and things will get worse. And as we all know, Donald Trump is all about the deal. So if he thinks that they're going to break off negotiations, he's going to do what they want to potentially get a deal. And that's where things are at right now with this one. Speaking of negotiations, I have a few things related to it that I thought were interesting. Let's go ahead and listen to this short video from a Senate hearing between Senator Coons and Secretary Bessent.
Treasury and state were rolling out new sanctions designations every few weeks, much of last year. How many new Russian entities have you designated under your sanctions authority since January?
I will get back to you with that number.
The answer is 0.
Yep.
How many entities worldwide have you sanctioned for doing business with Russian companies in ways that undermine our sanctions and export controls?
I will get back to you with that number.
I believe the answer is 0. I hope I'm wrong. I'd love it if you'd get back to me and tell me I'm wrong. But the PRC is helping Russia's defense industry by providing dual-use components and advanced technologies. Last week, Chancellor Merz briefed a bipartisan group of us on Russia's alarming rearmament with help from China, Iran, and North Korea. How many Chinese firms have been designated for doing work directly with Russia's defense industry?
I will get back to you on that. I will tell you that we have sanctioned numerous Chinese companies for receiving Iranian oil, and we have been working on the shadow fleets are not independent.
Yeah. Treasury and state.
Basically, Secretary Bessent had no real response to this. He went to Iranian oil. He went to the shadow fleet, which helps. I mean, if you're looking, he says the shadow fleets are not independent, meaning they've taken no specific direct action against the shadow fleets. They're dealing with Iranian oil, but not Russian oil effectively, and that tells you where the priorities of the administration lies. Secretary Hegseth was also in front of a Senate committee, and he did acknowledge that Russia is the aggressor and affirmed U.S. support for Ukraine, but he emphasized that the Trump administration's priority is to pursue negotiations rather than secure a clear military victory. He avoided explicitly endorsing a Ukrainian win, which should tell you exactly where the U.S. is at right now. They no longer believe in the possibility of actually stopping Russia. And I would contend that there's a lot to be said about that towards the end of the video today, where we've gotten we have, shall we say, Russian propaganda being forwarded by members of the administration. We'll talk about that when we get to that point, though. Hegseth continued stating, ultimately, peace between Ukraine and Russia serves our national interests, and we think the interests of both parties, even if the outcome will not be preferable to many in this room and many in our country. Under the previous administration, the policies they pursued, it has driven Russia and China closer together, so there's no doubt that China would prefer that Vladimir Putin had a good outcome. But it would also prefer a prolonged conflict that would keep us and other countries tied down and incapable of paying attention to the malign influence of China elsewhere. Shockingly, this is the same basic principle that they're trying to forward, that they can divorce Russia from China. And the truth is they can't, because China has been a far better ally to Russia than we have been to Ukraine. Why would Russia believe that we're going to be any better ally to them than China has to Russia? It's a fundamental misunderstanding of how Russia thinks. Russia respects strength, and we are projecting anything but. There was a forum in Uzbekistan, and when the Russian deputy prime minister stood up to give his speech, 50 U.S. and European representatives left the forum in protest. By CNN business editor-at-large journalist Richard Quest, according to sources, he refused to do so because of the participation of a Russian official. As soon as the Russian official took the floor, political and business representatives from the U.S. and European Union countries left the hall in protest, including from the U.S., U.K., Poland, Latvia, and Lithuania all walked out. From Alexander Dugin, it is especially important to introduce geopolitical disorder into internal American activity, encouraging all kinds of separatism and ethnic, social, and racial conflicts, actively supporting all dissident movements, extremist, racist, and sectarian groups, thus destabilizing internal political processes in the U.S. And this is from what people often call the brains of Putin, Alexander Dugin. He is the true believer in Russian greatness. And Alexander, this is what Russia is doing. We're seeing it happen day in, day out. Look at LA, look at Washington, look at across this nation. In fact, there are supposed to be protests across this nation on Saturday, as my understanding is. And literally, you could see it on a map. It could be in your own hometown. I've got several happening within 50 miles of me, for instance. And these protests this is where Russia has literally put money and pressure into groups that are intent on the destruction of the American way of life. The problem is they've put it into both sides. And we'll address that as we continue on. But this is Russia's goal. Russia's goal is not to find an ally. Russia's goal is to destroy America by destabilizing it internally and thus destroying its power. The power of freedom. President of Romania, Nicolae Dan, at the Ukraine Southeastern Europe Summit in Odessa, Russia is making unreasonable demands, knowing in advance they cannot be accepted. The only language Russia understands is force. We must do everything we can to help Ukraine negotiate from a position of strength. Then we have this interview where they're asking President Trump, what can you really do to force Ukraine and Russia to stop? And Trump says, look, they're losing 5,000 soldiers every single week. And she says, but they don't care. And Trump says, well, maybe Putin doesn't. And they kind of continued the statement, well, maybe not. We're making progress, then something gets bombed and it's over. Let's see if we can change that. And the end result is that the truth is President Trump has thrown away, burned, or removed all of his power and leverage, effectively thrown away the cards. He can't even turn over the table anymore because he doesn't have a place there. Putin and Russia don't respect the U.S. when the U.S. doesn't have strength and power. And right now, the U.S. has thrown away its strength and destroyed its own power. So why would they stop? They won't stop until they're forced to stop. And if the U.S. won't force them to stop, who will? By the way, yesterday was 2 weeks since Trump gave Putin 2 final weeks to show that he's serious about negotiations. We should just expect another 2-week deadline. From German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, the recent heavy attacks on Kyiv and other cities are once again attacks on the civilian population. These are the most serious war crimes, not military targets, but terror against the civilian population. Ukraine strikes bombers, Russia strikes civilians. It's that simple. On top of that, the U.S. is giving Russia the respect of having negotiations in Moscow. This should not be taking place at all as long as Russia is the aggressor in a war. They should not be meeting in Moscow at all. But they're going to do it again. They're going to give them that international recognition, giving them validity to their position, which we should never do. Russia's chief negotiator, Medinsky, claimed that Moscow wants to end this war quickly and that Ukraine's refusal to compromise, read that as surrender, will lead to further territorial losses. This is textbook imperial behavior. Invade, then pose as a peace seeker while blaming the victim for resisting territorial concessions. This is Russia. Even then, the Russians reiterated, I'm using that word specifically. Hi, Al, glad to see you here. reiterated their demands that NATO withdraw from the Baltic states to end the war against Ukraine. This has been a long-term demand. There is nothing new about this. It has nothing to do with Ukraine. It is a power play entirely intended to fracture NATO and throw us into the worst of withdrawal from the world stage. Even then, by the way, Anton Herashchenko states that the quote from Sergei Ryabkov doesn't actually directly mention the Baltic states. It just says that they can't resolve the conflict until NATO leaves. So leaving it very much vague and way open to interpretation. The Russians are even calling for diasporas in Western countries to riot in support of the Russian Federation. We're seeing riots in the U.S. right now. The Russians are going to support every riot they can, and they want those that are loyal to Russia to riot as well, to throw these nations into chaos and uncertainty. We need certainty and moral clarity at this time. Let's move on to the news out of Ukraine here. On the night of June 11th, Russia launched 85 Shahed-type strike drones and decoys, as well as Iskander-M ballistic missiles from multiple directions. Now, I brought this one up because, number one, it's recent. But if you look at the recent history, shortly after the attack, the Operation Spiderweb took place, Russia scraped together everything they could and threw almost 500 drones, missiles, and attacks at Ukrainian civilians. The Ukrainians managed to destroy all but about 20 of them. Still, those 20 were devastating, striking civilian targets across the nation. This could just indicates to me that the Russians kind of shot their wad. They went for the full, for everything they could. And it was only slightly larger than their worst before. It was about 20 larger than the previous ones. So I think they're probably trying to build up another massive attack again, but they still have to maintain that pressure consistently. Over in Kharkiv, the rescuers and police officers, let me turn this down just a little bit. In Kharkiv, rescuers and police officers saved a man and a dog trapped under the rubble. They were working as fire was spreading, and they had to work fast. But even as they were working to get to this man, the man sang the Ukrainian anthem. This is the everyday for Ukraine right now. Here's some video of a mobile fire team destroying 7 Shahed drones overnight. This is amazing work by the Ukrainians to use some of these old school air defense systems that use some of these old school cannon-based systems here. So everything's possible again when you're using slow drones and slow equipment like this. You can bring back old equipment to shoot it down. Really amazing. Odessa was also targeted extensively, including a maternity hospital, an emergency medical station, a private medical clinic, a sports complex, a zoo, and a railway station building. About the only one that might even be vaguely military out of that is the railway station building. This is from June 10th. And again from June 10th as well. This is a bombardment of another residential building in Kyiv when a Shahed struck their apartment building. This is an interesting little video, and I'm just going to go ahead and let it play. I'm not going to turn on the sound. It's only about 45 seconds long. This is a drone being used for medical evacuation. And while the circumstances have gotten so bad on the front lines that you can't afford to put a medical team in there. So if you can't be physically evacuated, if you can't basically get yourself into the cart, you're not going to have much chance of being evacuated. Even so, this is tremendous creativity with drone equipment to evacuate a wounded man without putting additional personnel at risk. A tremendous work by Ukraine to use these new drone systems quite effectively. More pictures from Kharkiv showing that 17 Shahed drones struck within just 10 minutes, killing 2 and injuring 54. Just strikes on civilians. They're trying to break the will of the Ukrainian people. There was finally an exchange. In fact, the Russians showed up 2 days early with a tractor trailer full of dead bodies. Says, oh, the Ukrainians aren't going to meet us and take him. Well, that wasn't what was negotiated. They showed up early on purpose to try and put it out there as a propaganda tool. That's just Russia screwing around like they always do. So I'm not going to put much more into it than that, other than to say that 1,200 of the Ukrainian fallen have been returned to Ukraine. Let's move to news out of Russia, and this is kind of a little bit disjointed. Got a lot of stuff in here. Some of it's repeats, so we're going to be kind of sorting it as I go through. Big explosion in Ingalls, a large column of smoke being seen. The explosion occurred at the 9th Central Automobile Repair Plant. Others had said it would have been at Ingalls Airfield. Others said that it would have been at the Crystal Oil Depot, but I believe it is correct that it is at the 9th Central Automobile Repair Plant. A lot of pictures of that explosion. And moving on, Ukrainian armed forces did use airdrop bombs to destroy a building where Russian troops were stationed. This included valuable electronic warfare signals, intelligence, and other assets in this facility. The Russians have been improving North Korea's KN-23 ballistic missiles, making them a very deadly short-range weapon, and I'm certain those improvements will be communicated back to Kim Jong-un. There was an attack on a Russian Shahed drone production facility in Tatarstan. Some of these videos are pretty vague here. This one just shows what looks like an interception in the air of a drone. So I don't know that this facility was ever actually hit, but there was the attempt at it. The Russians are getting kind of tired of getting hit back. They thought they could give Ukraine all the beating they wanted and never let them get a return shot. Now that the attacks are coming onto Russian soil, they're just begging for more Oreshniks to be launched at Ukraine to strike Kyiv, to destroy these places, believing that they can act with impunity, and shocked when they get hit back. This is Russia, never accepting responsibility for their decisions. Large factory in Kazan, Russia, erupted into fire. There is no claims that there was a Ukrainian drone involved in this, although I believe there was. It's believed that this was a shop on the gunpowder plant property, which I've seen multiple reports of a strike hitting. The Ukrainian General Staff also confirmed a strike on multiple high-value targets, including Tambov gunpowder plant, the explosions, the ammo depot of the 106th Airborne Division, and the Butralanovka Air Base, all with their claiming strikes successful on those locations. The 110th Territorial Defense Brigade destroyed a Russian field ammunition storage in the southern direction. We've seen some real action on the southern direction. In fact, while I'm thinking about it right now, there was a big claim of a successful drone attack on a train in southern Ukraine. And as I said, with big claims require big evidence, and then some people started retracting their claims associated. Here's the scoop. Initially, it was reported that a train with tanks and armored vehicles was struck. The train was reported to also have grain cars in the train itself, and at one point, while it was traveling across southern Ukraine, the drones came out of the grain cars and struck the locomotive, then destroyed the equipment on the train. This appears to have been the conflation of two separate reports, along with a bit of Russian creative thinking when they compared it to the Operation Spiderweb. There was a train that was targeted and the locomotive destroyed and the tracks damaged underneath. The train itself was derailed. There are no claims that it had military equipment on board specifically, that specific train. It probably did, but there was nothing that was visually obvious from what I could see. The destruction of the locomotive and the tracks are good targets, very valid ones in war, but there was no military equipment. There was military equipment in a general report along the same numbers as what was reported as part of this train strike, but that appeared to be for the general front line, not for this specific strike. So I just wanted to kind of point that out while I had the chance. Russia's Black Sea Fleet does not currently have a single combat-capable submarine. The Kilo-class B-271 Kulpino has been sent for repairs prior to inspection. All other submarines permanently docked in inoperable condition or can only be used for training. So their last functional submarine has been removed from the Black Sea temporarily. From the Institute for the Study of War, Putin appears to be switching between rhetoric focused on Russian ethnic nationalism and Russian multinationalism, but remains committed to promoting anti-Western sentiment and the militarization of Russia's youth. They're working to increase the number of North Korean labor migrants in Russia to support Russia's workforce and possibly even directly join the military. This is kind of Russia's overall theme right now. They're promoting more anti-Western rhetoric. They're creating an enemy. This is the actions of a dictator trying to maintain control. They have to maintain more enemies and create more of them to keep them coming. All right, I already talked about that one earlier. This comes from Leonid Nevzlin, and talks about the economic news from Russia today. The net profit of companies extracting oil and natural gas in the first quarter of 2025 fell by nearly half, according to Rosstat data. Over 3 months, oil and gas corporations earned 789.5 billion rubles, compared to 1.445 trillion a year earlier. Oil refineries were on the brink of losses. In the quarter, they earned 4.5 billion rubles, 23 times less than in January to March 2024. The coal industry is in similar crisis. In the first quarter, the net loss of coal companies reached 79.9 billion rubles. They're already running in the red. But Russia did see some positive news. There was an acceleration in the growth of the funeral industry's turnover. Funeral organizations earn nearly 40 billion rubles, which is 12.7% more year on year for the same period last year compared to 2023. The growth was 9%. So economic indicators in Russia do not look good right now. And a lot of this is the falling price of crude oil. The Middle Eastern countries have promised to jack up their pumping. I think that's mostly to keep the U.S. from getting serious about pumping their own oil. Just saying. But it has the knock-on effect of reducing the price of oil. If it gets under around 55 or so, Russia just can't make a dollar doing it. They cannot make money on their oil if they do. All right, already talked about that one earlier. There's also a fire at the Saki airfield in Novoferovka in Crimea. This is where the runway and warehouses are, and there's no reported reason why, just that there is a fire here at the fuel, at this likely location where aircraft and fuel were stored. A lot of fires. There was also one at the Krymsk airfield in Krasnodar region of the Russian Federation, and 2 fires were reported at once at the Morozovsk airfield in the Rostov region of the Russian Federation as well. A lot of burning things at Russian airfields these days. They're still inspecting trucks like crazy. I already mentioned in Operation Spiderweb on my last major live stream, we're now having to inspect every single truck. And everywhere there's a truck, there's a potential avenue of attack. So this is literally grinding Russian logistics to a halt. it appears that Russia is even more concerned with attacks on the Russian homeland here, because they have now put an electronic warfare ship at the entrance to the Bay of Zaliv shipyard in Kerch. This has got all the anti-drone equipment they can put on one ship. They've got the stuff to jam GPS signals and stuff like that on this. They're trying to protect their manufacturing shipyard and keep it from being targeted by Ukrainian drones. Let's briefly talk about China, though. Here is Chinese production of fiber optic coils for Russian FPV drones. Yeah, Al, you are correct. It pulls people away from other fronts to force inspection and jams up their manpower big time. It really is, from a psychological perspective, Operation Spiderweb will be far more effective than even the strategic loss of those aircraft for Russia. The Russians are going to just have to. They're going to be totally tied up doing these things for a while. Anyway, this is PGI Technology in China, running 18 machines for 14 hours daily, producing 500 meters of fiber per minute, 500 coils per shift, with expansion to 50 machines operating 24/7. This is how the fiber optic drones for Russia are getting their fiber optics now. China's basically getting more invested in working for China. Hi, Ozzy. Glad to see you as well. Always good to see you on board. Let's move on to the international front. Viktor Orban states that Russians are too weak to attack NATO. That's right. They're not even capable of defeating Ukraine, so they're really incapable of attacking NATO. Now, I have mixed feelings about this. I have not concluded that it is some kind of change of heart for Viktor Orban. And he's been making these less pro-Russian statements lately. And so I suspect that they are looking at the writing on the wall and seeing how things are going with Ukraine and saying that their own political future, especially as their own nations are rising up against them, they're looking at their political future and seeing that tying it to Russia may not be working out to their benefit. However, this could also be part of Russia's disinformation campaign, trying to get Europe to back off on preparing for war against Russia and defending themselves against Russia, saying, look, Russia's too weak. They couldn't possibly do this. There's no way that these statements that Russia could attack NATO could even be true. It's just impossible, even as Russia prepares to do so. Just like the month before they invaded Ukraine in 2022, where they said, no, we're not planning to invade Ukraine. This is just exercises. There's nothing happening here. And Viktor Orban seems to have gotten on board with that. Part of that, of course, may be that a pundit, Georg Spoltel, who is Orban's best pundit. I'm sure I just butchered his name, but he's been influencing public opinion for years now, but he's a foreign agent for Russia. He could be trying to cover up for that news coming out. President Vučić of Serbia has come out and said that Serbia is ready to rebuild one or two Ukrainian cities, or maybe even a region, to demonstrate support for Ukraine. They says that they can count on Serbia for support, for political support for their borders and for their nation. They'd be happy to be part of helping them to rebuild. Again, Vučić was just in Moscow a month ago for the May 9th parade in Moscow. So, change of heart. I mean, it's odd that both Orban and Vučić are saying similar things at the same time here. Feels coordinated. Just saying. The newly elected president of Romania, though, made a visit to Ukraine. Oh, by the way, Vučić is actually going to make a visit to Ukraine pretty quick here. I believe it starts today or tomorrow, pretty soon. I don't remember the details. But he's going to visit Ukraine now. So that's a change of stance, if for nothing else. So anyway, the president of Romania is going to visited Ukraine yesterday. This is there's tightening. There's a lot of tightening of the relationship between Romania and Moldova and Ukraine. They're all feeling the same pressure from Russia at this point in time, and they're going to get closer together the more Russia pushes. NATO allies are considering allowing contributions to Ukraine's defense to count toward a new defense spending target expected to be adopted at the upcoming summit. The draft declaration also proposes reducing defense trade barriers. There could be some changes to wording by the time the meeting happens, but this would be great news for Ukraine. That would mean that countries could get up to this new 4 or 5% spending target, and then just go all in with helping out Ukraine as well, and have that count towards their target. The United Kingdom has promised 1.7 billion pounds worth of equipment and additional weapon purchases, including the Rapid Ranger air defense missile systems, which the Ukrainians appear to love, and Martlet lightweight missiles. Good on the UK for keeping the assistance going. Now, this is an interesting story that I've bumped into, and you can take it however you want. We know that Russia has been making a serious play to get Elon Musk to move to Russia, and for good reason. If Musk leaves America, Musk's space ventures also leave America. And then Russia gets all that technology and all that knowledge. They're making a serious play for Elon Musk, including Elon Musk's father coming to Moscow and saying that it's an incredible city. This is total PR, and you can see it happening right before your eyes. As of July 1st, however, the organization documenting Russian war crimes in Ukraine will cease operations and lay off all staff. This was a U.S. State Department-funded organization, and the latest batch of budget cuts looks to be eliminating this function. Once again, it looks like the Trump admin is trying its best to turn its face the other way. Finland has summoned Russia's chargé d'affaires over an alleged airspace violation near Porvoo on June 10th, which the Finnish border guard is investigating. That's right. The Russians have been getting more aggressive in this area here, in the Baltic Sea area. So they've actually been escorting their Shadow Fleet tankers with Russian air power even. Do I have this in another place? Because I think I do. Hold on. Hold the thought here. Yes, I do. So I'm going to save this one for later, and I'll talk about it then. Slovakian Prime Minister Robert Fico threatens to block the European Union's 18th sanctions package against Russia unless they propose a real solution for Slovakia's energy needs. They've had years to prepare for the cutoff of Russian gas and oil, and yet they refuse to do so. This is on them. Now they're trying to blackmail the EU. The German Foreign Intelligence Service has gathered evidence that Russia is planning escalations in the Baltic states, with including a little green men scenario to appear in the Baltic states, just like happened in Crimea. This is actually, I consider this a highly likely scenario at this point. By doing a little green men operation, even if they fail, they throw the Baltics into confusion. They basically call the bluff of the West. I could see this happening. This really makes sense to me. And it's something that I kind of expect to happen soon. Confrontation with Russia is unavoidable. At one point, Europe will have to battle Russia. Russia is already waging a war on Europe. They are the enemy, and the longer we wait, the harder it will be. It's quite simple. Russia's made their intentions clear, and clearer, and clearer. If Europe doesn't wake up, there won't be any saving it. Now, one of the things that I forgot to mention earlier when I was talking about Viktor Orban is that Hungary has shown interest in the locations of Ukraine's air defense systems and military units. It's wartime. How should we respond to this during wartime? I'm not saying that Budapest wants something, but if not, then for whom is it gathering the information? I asked NATO representatives whether they had requested Hungary to collect data on such matters. They said no. Viktor Orban is being caught with his hand in the cookie jar. And it looks like he's trying to backpedal a little bit to soften that blow. Transnistria, just like Serbia. Serbia. Hang on, let me think that through for a second. Just like Slovakia. There we go. Now we got it right. Transnistria is declaring an economic emergency because they don't have Russian gas flowing in. They've been offered to help to buy American gas through the pipeline from Europe. And they said, no, not interested. Of course, it helps that they weren't paying for gas from Russia. And now Russia said, well, fork over the money or there's no more gas. And Transnistria is saying, wait a second, we're your ally here. Why in the world are you cutting us off? And now there's an economic emergency, and we're going to blame the Europeans for it. This is how the Russian mindset works. Let's move to the news, the frontline situation here. I'm going to come back to that in a while. And I don't have a whole lot here. It's the Russians have begun some significant operations. They've made a fair amount of advance in open territory in Sumy. In addition, there's this strange advance in Malinivka, east of Hualapol, with no significant movement in this area since 2022. This is an area where the supply depots were destroyed just the other day, and this just suspiciously timed. It's odd. I mean, it's a spot that's been quiet for a long time. Why open it now? They must see an advantage to this type of an advance. So they've made a little bit more of an advance in open terrain. From War Gonzo, which is a Russian source, he kind of goes through everything. Zaporizhia, I'd say no significant changes. Donetsk, he's claiming a breakthrough of Russian forces towards the Mokryali River, and with tactical successes in Novonikolaivka, where they gained access to the southern part of the settlement, with fierce fighting underway in the Orakovo area. I think Russia's trying to push Donetsk as much as they can because they want to mark a genuine victory, a real W in the column to show that they are making real progress. More fighting in Chasiv Yar direction. He's claiming that they're gradually dislodging Ukrainian forces, probably true, ironically, in this area. Sumy direction. The Ukrainian armed forces continue to attempt to break through to Totkino which would be actually in Russia itself. But the Russians have managed to move forward some in the Sumy direction. They're trying to, the overall situation is that the Russians have advanced into open territory. The Ukrainians are fighting them back. We'll just be monitoring that as we go. Already mentioned this one here. This is this is the ammunition storage that was right behind that area where the front suddenly got active, I mentioned before. And this is video of that ammunition dump being blowing up, basically. Russia is advancing toward Konstantinivka, which, along with Pokrovsk, may become one of the main targets of Russia's summer offensive. Again, looks like they want to fully seize the Donetsk region here, and that appears to be what they're hoping to pull off as their goal. Ironically, I'm going to state it this way. Even though that's not the end of it, successfully completely seizing one of their desired oblasts would be a huge PR win for Russia. At least it would be a real shot in the arm for their forces. All right, so here's the situation over near Sumy. You can see the Ukrainians still hold parts of Kursk Oblast over here, just a little bit. Nothing. I mean, nothing really territorially significant there. This is a bunch of little villages and things, an open territory that the Russians have seized in just the last week or so over near Sumy. It's the first real advance they've had in this direction in a while. I believe they're trying to put Sumy under tube artillery range, but we'll have to see if how that pans out over the next few days. I don't remember how long this has been here. It seems it's been a while. Yeah, it's been there a while, so not current. No changes over here in the area near Volchansk, or for quite some time. I mean, maybe little bits and pieces. Yeah, no major changes in this area here. The Russians don't seem to be doing a ton, but they are working towards Kupiansk. Let's see if there's real visible changes here. Nope. This is one of the areas that they seem to be kind of trying to get towards here. They managed to push to the Oskil River here some time ago, but they've not been able to really expand this front here successfully so far. They're working on it. It's one of their goals, at least. The real action is near Ochoratina, or going to these smaller towns here. You see this advance outside of Oleksandropol. There was a little bit over here as well. You can see near Oleksivka. A lot of action in that area there. Let's see. There we go. This appears to be the area that we've mentioned a couple of times where the Russians have suddenly started trying to advance again. Interesting timing. So keep an eye on that area, but there's no real big, wins to be had here as far as like major towns or anything like that. We'll just watch it. Poltavka seems to be about the biggest thing, and it's not that big. So we'll keep an eye on it. It's interesting timing, to say the least. And that's kind of the front lines right there. Not a whole lot going on elsewhere as far as changes in lines. There's always things going on. For instance, the situation in Kherson continues to be very difficult as the Russians continue to use it as their human safari to train their drone operators, attacking every civilian they can in the area. No surprises there from our perspective, at least. And I've gotten going into some interesting extras here, and some of it's some pretty big stuff. Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, actually released this enormous video about nuclear annihilation, basically saying that the U.S. had no need to even use them on Japan. So this is just bad things would happen. I mean, obviously, if nuclear war happens, this would be bad things. But basically, the implication here is that we should surrender to Russia because they're willing to wave their nuclear stick around. And we don't want to tempt them into nuclear war. This is Russian propaganda emerging from the mouth of Tulsi Gabbard. It's not even different than the things that the Russians put out themselves. And quite the psyop taking place. The fact that this is a person anywhere near the levers of power frightens me to no end. On top of that, Secretary Rubio released a press statement on Russia Day, saying that the United States remains committed to supporting the Russian people as they build on their aspirations for a brighter future. Where is this coming from? It makes no sense. This is aid and comfort to the enemy in this case. How can we be releasing statements like this? Still, the Ukrainians continue to work. This is some Ukrainian air defenders at work destroying Shahed drones. Just a cool video, 13 seconds worth of firepower being shot at Russian targets. The Ukrainians have made it clear that they are going to be... Pardon me for just a second. I got to deal with something that could be a problem here. Only be a second. Don't worry. Sorry about that. I have an old fan that I have left that I have in my office here. I love the thing, but if you leave it running for too long, it tends to overheat and cause issues. So I apparently left it on overnight and I forgot that, so I needed to turn it off. Anyway, the Ukrainian SBU is declaring that they are going to hit Russia where they think they are unreachable. That was shown in Operation Spiderweb and continues with the Kerch Bridge attack and various other attacks in places that Russia is convinced that they are immune to attack. And I think we'll see more and more of those attacks from Russian soil. Here's a 4-minute long video on Operation Spiderweb. So it's got subtitles. I believe it's in Ukrainian language, though. Let's go ahead and pop this thing up.
Росія
I'm just going to play it. Go ahead and read the subtitles if you'd like.
Росія принесла в Україну смерть та щоденний терор мирного населення. Українці гинуть від ракет стратегічної авіації РФ. Ворог був упевнений, його авіація недосяжна. Через льоти тушок сотні тисяч людей проводять ночі в укриттях. Бомбардувальники цілять по мирних містах, лікарнях, електростанціях. Президент України Володимир Зеленський поставив завдання зупинити цей терор. І СБУ взялася за роботу. Складну, безпрецедентну і зухвалу. Керував цією операцією особисто голова служби генерал-лейтенант Василь Малюк. Так почалася павутина. У глибокому російському тилу, просто під носом ФСБ, співробітники СБУ втілили унікальний задум. Вони переправили в Росію FPV-дрони, які розмістили в дахах дерев'яних модульних будинків. Підготовка дронів та будинків відбувалася всього за декілька кілометрів від офісу ФСБ в одній із російських областей. Ці будинки завантажили на фури і відправили до аеродромів, де розміщувалися стратегічні бомбардувальники. Удар планувався по 5 аеродромах: Оленя, північ Росії, Іваново та Дягілєво, центральна частина РФ, Білая, південна частина Росії, Українка, далекий схід РФ. Таким чином, павутина СБУ мала оплутати всю Росію. На 4 аеродромах, крім далекосхідного, вдалося реалізувати задумане. Усе було вираховано до секунди. Заради одного моменту. І він настав. Кількість регіонів та дистанції між ними свідчать про масштаб спецоперації СБУ. Вона відбувалася одночасно у 3 різних часових поясах із задіянням 117 дронів. Стратегічні літаки Ту-95, Ту-22М3, А-50, Ту-160, Іл-78 горіли як паперові моделі. Оператори дронів були точно в паливні баки, двигуни, ракети. ППО не допомогла. Шини не врятували. 41 літак. Понад третину ворожої стратегічної авіації уражено або виведено з ладу. І все це FPV-дронами вартістю кілька сотень доларів. Збитки ворога – понад 7 мільярдів доларів США. Але ще ціннішим був удар по відчуттю безкарності Росії. Це операція, яка змінила правила гри. Це відповідь тим, хто думав, що ми безсилі. Це наше безумовне право на захист свого населення та наших міст. СБУ б'є і буде бити ворога навіть там, де він вважає себе недосяжним.
Україна має право на захист. Я дякую сьогодні особливо Службі безпеки України. Ви довели блискучою операцією «Павутина». Війна завдає відчутних збитків та втрат, зокрема і агресору. І саме це і є відновленням справедливості. Дякую вам ще раз. Слава Україні!
Pretty good video, and I found it particularly interesting that they actually acknowledged a fifth airfield they targeted and were not able to do so, indicating that, I mean, obviously this is Ukrainian equivalent of propaganda here, but they're reporting accurate information as part of their propaganda, for lack of a better way to say it. This is showing that, yes, they had intended 5 airfields. They don't say what happened with the 5th airfield, just that they weren't able to strike it. That's just fascinating that they would provide that additional piece of information, showing how it worked, what happened. Obviously, they understand that the information war is tantamount to gaining further international support and helping them in their activities. Interesting side bit of news here. Over in Oregon, there was a street named Kiev. Now that, and infants, apparently English is not working for me today. Joking there. A neighborhood in Springfield, Oregon on June 10th renamed a local street from Kiev to Kyiv, a move initiated by members of the Kyiv Independence global community. Photos shared by the Kyiv Independent show the newly installed blue and yellow street sign reflecting both the correct Ukrainian transliteration and the national colors of Ukraine. The change comes amid a broader effort by Ukraine and its allies worldwide to move away from Russian-derived place names and honor Ukraine's linguistic and political independence. I thought that was just pretty cool. And finally, look at the mustache on this guy. That is an impressive mustache to take into battle. And that's everything for today. Thank you very much for joining me. Glad to have you here. It's been busy, but I want you to know that that I'm still here. And I try and call the balls and the strikes as I see them. And I pray that Ukraine will win and that Russia will lose. Because in the end, one is a sworn enemy of us in America. And a sworn enemy of Europe. One wants to conquer, take, steal, commit atrocious acts in the name of empire. And the other wants freedom. Freedom to decide who they want to be friends with. Freedom to decide where their nation will go. Freedom away from Russia. You guys have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you on the next video.